first speaker, who is Nina Gordon-Kirsch. Nina is a water educator with Home2Headwaters. And Nina, are you here? Yeah. I hope so. Come on up. For the second half of Nina's presentation, she's going to be joined by Rohan, Tyagi. Rohan, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. And Zachary Drummond. Rohan is the Vice Chair of Sustainable Leaders in Action, and Zachary is a water quality monitoring technician with the Watershed project. Nina, take it away. Hold it.
So I love that last question that we were asked to reflect on, which was, what happens after this? Like, we have this amazing opportunity today to talk to each other about the future of water in this area and in our state, and then what happens next? And my answer to that is educating our youth, educating the next generation. So here's a little story from me about how I feel inspired to be involved in California water. I'm just going to go right into it. Hi, my name is Nina Gordon-Kirsch, and I am passionate about protecting the waters. I grew up in the Berkeley Public Schools system, and I did not learn where my water comes from. I left the Bay for undergrad, and I studied environmental science and went on to get a Fulbright to go to Israel and Palestine and look at wastewater reuse. When I came home to California, back to the Bay, I started tracing the water systems, and I wondered, where does my water come from? This precious, precious being that just flows out of my tap when I turn it on. Where does it come from? And I found out the McCollum River.
I'm 31 years old, and this is my first time seeing where my water comes from.
5 years ago, I knew that I had a mission to do. A seed dropped into my chest, and I knew I have to walk my waters. And the time has come. That was 5 years ago. And this summer, I'm excited to say that I will be walking 200 miles from Oakland, California to Highland Lakes. And with your support, I will make that journey happen. It's not going to be an easy thing to walk these waters. It's not just like a straight path. There's no trail the whole way. I'm looking at maps online of how to get there and what parks to go in. There's public lands, there's private lands. I'm going to have to ask permission from farmers to walk on their land. I also am asking permission from the indigenous folks along the way if I can walk on their land. I'm going to bring an inner tube with me, swim, float my backpack across.
It's dawn. We woke up when it was dark out, and now we packed up camp.
It's what we call a yard sale. We got off the river and the sun kind of had come out, but not really. But once we got all our clothes on and everything, we put all our stuff out in the sun to dry. A big part of the budget is going towards a documentary film crew that will be tracking my journey as I walk from Oakland to Highland Lakes. They'll be putting it together and making a final product that I can bring into high schools to teach Oakland and Berkeley high schoolers where their water comes from. I will need support with a logistical vehicle who's assisting me in having medical support along the way. I will need camping gear and food and all of the preparatory work for my journey, like route planning and scouting trips. I have a history teaching in high schools, and it's my dream to introduce the McCollum River, who brings life to the Bay Area, to these students, to the next generation, so that they can be ecologically minded citizens as they grow up and take care of our waters in the future of California. This isn't just a California issue. Our state produces more than 50% of the country's fruits, vegetables, and nuts. The fate of the waters in California affect all of us. Another important outcome of this journey is the connections it'll make along the way. There's people and ecological spaces upriver, there's farmers in the middle, there's us in the urban environment down at the bottom, and this provides an opportunity to create bridges between communities. This is why I was put on this planet. I'm going to be walking in triple digits along this waterway because this river needs to be witnessed. These waters need to be paid attention to. And I am so honored to get to walk this line and document this journey to bring to future generations. So that video was made before the walk happened. The walk happened in the summer of 2022. So there's two phases of this project. The first phase is the walk, and the second phase is education. So for my walk, I walked from my house in Oakland, 240 miles up to Highland Lakes. And for about 3 years prior to walking, I was in touch with Indigenous communities all throughout my path to ask for permission to walk. And that was a much longer process than I expected, and I felt really blessed and sent off in a good way with their support. The walkers, myself, I walked the whole way. My dog, Petey, joined me as much as he could, but some days it got too hot for him, and sometimes it was too many miles for him, so my dad had to come pick him up at some point, but he did join me for a good portion of it. And then the third one is Flaggy. This is Flaggy. Had to bring him today. And Flaggy was actually a really essential part of the journey because so many people would come up to me and say, "What are you doing?" or "What does your flag say?" And I sadly did leave Flaggy on the side of the road at water breaks sometimes, or at the end of the day when we went for a swim, I would forget to bring Flaggy in the car. So there were a few times where we had to go back and find Flaggy. I also had friends and different people in the community come and ask if they could walk with me, which I super welcomed, and it was an honor to have people drive far or walk far to witness the McCullummy River. And I met a lot of people along the way on the trail who I didn't know. Do you guys ever wonder where your water comes from?
No.
The McCullummy River.
Well, I didn't know that.
I know, nobody knows it. Do you want to say that with me? McCullummy.
McCullummy.
Yeah, McCullummy. So what I was surprised about is along the Bay Trail in the first part of my journey, I talked to a lot of Bay Area residents who had never heard of the McCullummy River before and did not know where their water comes from. They knew East Bay Mud, who provides us with our water, but had no idea anything about Comanche Reservoir, Pardee Reservoir, McCullummy River. But once I got to the Delta and I crossed the San Joaquin River, this is a picture of me with Cece and Steve, some farmers who I met along the way. Everyone knows where their water came from in the Delta. They know they're monitoring their own wells. If it's not from their well, they know which surface water it's from and how often and how much they're paying for it. And it was like I crossed into a completely different world of urban residents having no clue where their water comes from, because we're never taught that. I was never taught that in Berkeley school systems. To the Delta and the Central Valley, where water is so essential to everyday life and isn't actually guaranteed. And this is a project Cece and Steve showed me where they're restoring, a bunch of organizations together are restoring some old farmlands to become wetlands. Wind at my back, follow me to the Delta. Wind by my side, didn't know I could love ya till you cooled me down and lifted me up. So this is just an example of a really beautiful project of a place that didn't have enough water to continue farming, and they turned it into this amazing stop for the Pacific flyway birds to have a home. So after I finished in the Delta,
I crossed into more complicated territory where there wasn't a trail, there weren't levee roads, and it was really like bushwhacking and walking through farmlands to continue to follow the river.
Today is day 14, and yesterday was our first day. I mean, a lot of the roads we've been walking on are definitely not public roads, and they've had gates, but they haven't had barbed wire and locks and things that are like actively keeping people out physically. And yesterday was the first day that there was a locked gate with barbed wire on top that we had to like either climb over or squeeze through between the locks. And I was thinking to myself, like, do we need a story? Do we have to have a cover? Like, I have this tripod, I have this vest, like I could be like surveying the wildlife or surveying the health of the river. And then I thought to myself, like, no, like there's no story. This is the story. Like the story is tracking the McCollum River and making this film for youth and witnessing the waters. Like that is the story, and I don't have to lie or make something up. And luckily, the river is not private property, and if anything goes wrong, I can hop in the river.
And one thing I'll just say about that too is I am white and I am a woman, and walking and trespassing didn't feel safe to me in terms of my body, but in a more political, outward-facing identity, I didn't feel like I was going to be like tracked down as much. So after I got to Lodi, there was so much private property, like house and house and house and house, all right next to each other on the river, that I couldn't actually physically walk anymore because there was so much obstruction. So we got into kayaks and we kayaked upstream for 2 days. And that was really hard. We're pulling our boats because the current is too strong, and we just got to a deep point in the water, and it's too dangerous to walk into deep water. Over there. So we might have to portage our boats around on land. Not really sure yet. Thinking about actually if we should ditch the boats altogether somewhere.
We might have to go around.
Just swim upstream if we ditch the boats. So there was a moment when we were pulling our boats upstream. I'm with my Richard, my co-teacher from my high school class that I teach, and we were like, should we be doing this? Like going upstream in boats is just like, what are we doing? And I sat down and I ate a Snickers bar, which was like one way that I coped on my walk. And I looked at Richard and I was like, well, it's not like I have anywhere else to be right now, so we may as well keep trying. And we made it to Comanche Dam. And then I got out of my boat and I kept walking. And I got to the reservoirs, and that was when I saw one of the reservoirs from the Costa Crest Trail. And I was elated. I was like, this is my drinking water. This is Party Reservoir that brings water to the East Bay to 1.4 million people. And I got to talk to the rangers about that. And then I set off up into the portion of the river that was more wild, less manipulated by humans. I walked through the Electra fire burn. The Electra fire broke out on probably my 5th day of walking, and I was really concerned that I wouldn't be able to do that section of the journey. But about 10 days later, they had it all under control, and it still was really hard to walk through because it was completely exposed. There was no shade. You can see this picture of my pants with so much ash and bushwhacking through Manzanita. And I had someone named John, a friend named John, come with me who's from that area, and he knew he knew how to go pretty well. And then I got to the most challenging part of the journey, which is Salt Springs Reservoir. starting at Salt Springs Reservoir, going into the deep river canyon. So it's off-trail travel for a backcountry trip. This was the only portion that I was actually backpacking. The rest I was doing day hikes or walking from one place to the next and sleeping. And the day that we woke up to start backcountry travel, there was 250 AQI from the Oaks fire in Yosemite. And it almost made us turn around and not keep going. And then on after 33 days of walking, I made it to Highland Lakes. Highland Lakes is one of the headwaters of the McCollum River. And it was amazing. A bunch of my community came and we camped there for the weekend and we sang songs, and I felt so grateful that people from the Bay Area drove so far to celebrate this water. And we also got picked up by a lot of press, which was awesome. The San Francisco Chronicle came out. CBS came like 3 different times along my journey to see how it was going, and Berkeley Side and a bunch of other local papers too. So the second part of this journey, I thought it was over. Like, I reached the lakes. Okay, great, done, check. But no, this means so much more. That's like only one drop in the bucket, because the ripple is the educational piece, is the impact campaign. So phase 1 is done. I completed the walk. We fundraised all the money to make that happen, to have the documentary film crew come out. And now we're starting phase 2, which is raising money to make the educational curriculum. So the educational curriculum will include a short film portraying the walk and the scenery and the people who I met along the way. And then we're going to supplement that with reflection questions and maps, and we're working with Sogorea Land Trust, an indigenous-led organization in the Bay Area, and also the Washoe tribe up in the Sierras, to make indigenous-informed maps and educational pieces that students can learn about, like what the rivers are called in other languages and how these waters were tended for thousands of years. And this is so important because we have a lot of issues with water in California. We have drought and atmospheric rivers. We're not connected to our water sources. Like my whole first half of the journey where people had never heard of the McCollum River, that's a problem to me. If we're in a place where we're needing to rely on water every single day and there's such immense changes with our water year to year, we need to fill that gap in and help people become more connected to their waters. And it's unsustainable to live where there isn't water. So having people wake up and taking that into consideration, and also making informed decisions about where they live or how to bring water to different places. So our curriculum is going to increase the people's ability to cope with solving changing water resources, because once you're tapped into those things, you can start thinking holistically about it, and people will have a different perspective once they actually get connected to their water sources. And I've actually seen this. I've taught a water resources class for the past 7 years, and I think I'll talk about this more with my panel, but it makes an immense difference when students actually learn this from a young age versus, I'm guessing, the majority of us who have come to this in our adult life to be able to be water keepers. When students are given this opportunity from a younger age, they're more inspired to take that path instead of finding it somewhere down the road. And so these are just some photos from being with my high school students, and I hope in our panel to tell some inspiring stories about how my students have shown me how meaningful it is to commune with water and to have education about water. So that's my presentation, and now do I welcome up my panelists? Yeah, so I'm going to welcome up Zach and Rohan to join me to talk about water.
Test.
Test.
Test. Test.
Do you guys each want to introduce yourselves to everyone?
My name is Zachary Drummond, and I'm an intern at the Watershed project as well as the water quality monitoring technician.
My name is Rohan Tyagi. I'm a junior at Heritage High School, and I'm the vice chair of Sustainable Leaders in Action, which is a youth branch of Sustainable Contra Costa.
So to start off with some questions for you, Nina, what made you decide to embark on this journey?
So what made me decide to embark on this journey is the first thing is that I was inspired to do it. There was one moment in my life that I can palpably feel in my body and remember when I met someone named Samantha Bodie who lived in Los Angeles, and she walked from LA to Mono Lake and traced her whole journey to see where her water came from. And I remember this moment of being like, whoa, I started crying and I was like, I think I have to do that. And then immediately it was like, no way, that's way too hard. I don't know how to do that. I can't do that. And then over the years that kind of grew in me and I realized I actually did have to do it.
Definitely. Just adding on to that, listening to your wonderful presentation, I had the question of why it was important to have an innate connection to our land and our resources.
Yeah, I think one thing that I feel that I've learned societally growing up is that humans are separate from nature, that we like live on land and we use water, and my vision of how we can really survive on this planet, especially given climate change and especially in California, is to realize that we are a part of nature. And once we tune in to how land wants to be tended and how waters need to be cared for, that will be the sustainable solution going forward. So, yeah.
So what happened to Petey, the dog, in this story?
Petey! Petey doesn't like hot weather, so I made him like a training schedule in the beginning where he was going to come with me every other day of walking, so he would have walk day, rest day, walk day, rest day, until we got to the Delta. And the Delta, it was in the triple digits to be walking, and there was one day even before we got to the Delta, I think closer to Antioch, where Petey just sat down and he said, "Nope, Mom, I'm not walking anymore." And I was like, "Okay, Petey, are you sure?" And we rested for an hour, and he said, "Yeah, I'm done." So I actually had to cut that day early, and I took a lift. Petey and I took a lift back to my car, and I brought him. My dad ended up picking him up from my friend who came to get him. And then he rejoined me at the end of the journey for the last few nights, and he finished strong, and it was a good time.
I know that you mentioned that you worked with Indigenous communities for about 3 years prior to your walk. During your walk, how did the Indigenous peoples feel about the journey?
Yeah, well, before I started, I received some really beautiful emails from some of the different tribes just blessing my journey and saying that walking waters is an Indigenous practice that their culture has done for a really long time, and they wish that everybody could partake in that kind of thing. So that was sweet to get sent off with good vibes and good messages. And then at the very end, Daryl Cruz from the Washoe tribe wanted to come and walk my last 2 days with me. And so when I got out of the backcountry, I told him, "Daryl, I made it out of the backcountry. It was so hard. Like, I can't believe that that's something that some people choose to do." And he knows that area very well. And he said, "Wow, Nina, I can't believe you've actually walked from the ocean, from the bay, all the way up to this water source up here." Because he said his ancestors used to do that as a trade, like to bring items to the coast and back. And he said he doesn't know anybody who's walked that whole entire line since his ancestors did it a long time ago. So that was really meaningful. And then unfortunately he got COVID and he couldn't walk the last 2 days with me, but he sent me some really sweet messages.
And just adding on to that, considering that some people along the way got COVID, what were some difficulties that you faced along the trip?
Yeah, some difficulties. One of my supporters' partners got COVID, so I had to fill in somebody last moment for support. But then more so, some of the difficulties were just logistical. PG&E, because of the fires during the summer, PG&E ended up closing one of the roads down that I was supposed to walk on for about 2 days because they didn't want people recreating or starting fires somewhere that they shouldn't be. And that caused a huge issue because I couldn't access my trail. But we ended up finding some loopholes and figuring out how to get around certain things. And also the fire, the 250 AQI that day that we were supposed to start our backcountry trip was a huge challenge, and I ended up breaking down crying and feeling like we were going to have to go home and stop the journey. Okay, so now that you guys have asked me some questions, I have some questions for you. And the first one is, I'm wondering how since given that you're both environmentally minded and working in water, how do you feel about the future of water resources in California?
I feel like we're on the right track. I feel like we're learning every day how to better manage these resources, and we've come a long way. And even at the household level, when it comes to our appliances, things like that, they're getting more efficient and more efficient every year.
Yeah, I'm incredibly optimistic of the future of our water resources. Just seeing everyone here today makes me so inspired for the future of how we conserve our own water. But working with youth in different capacities, one of the things I do is I work at Lake Merritt, and it's so inspiring to see youth come out every week to test the water, to monitor, to be a part of that environmental effort. So I think that as individuals, if we do take that opportunity to create change, there really is hope for our future.
And then, given that each of you are from the younger generation in this room, I'm curious if there's any messages that you, in this theme of intergenerational watershed tending, are there any things that you want to share with people of the older generations, either in this room or worldwide, messages you'd like to get out there?
Yeah. Just to start, so I know oftentimes that youth, people who work in environmental justice and the environment in general, often hear the remark, "Oh, we're sorry that we left this huge problem up to you guys to face, to solve, and to fix for all of humanity." But you guys are still here. Ultimately, this is an intergenerational issue that we can all take. There are efforts and practices that we can all choose to change. Whether you're 90 years old or 7, I think that there's really change to be found in each and every one of us, and that's something that we can all take, not just a younger people solve the issue.
Yeah.
And to build off of that response, I would have to say that each generation builds off of the work that was done previous to them. So we're still working on some of the things that you guys have done, and I have a lot of hope and a lot of faith for the generations to come after our generation.
Okay, and the last question.
Why is it important to teach our youth about where our water comes from?
Well, considering you guys have been a little bit involved in my story so far, I think I'll ask you that question first, and then I would love to answer it after. But yeah, what do you guys think about why it's important to teach young people about water?
I think that it's important to teach our youth about water because they are going to grow up to appreciate and value the resource rather than take it for granted. It's not something that you can just go to the grocery store and buy necessarily, like fresh tap water from the river. and it helps, keep mind of like pollution and to be aware of your impact that you have.
Definitely, I'd have to agree with that. Living in the Delta and in places along the coast, just like Lake Michigan and the Ganges River in India in the past, I know how important water is, for every aspect of like my living. But, sometimes when I ask my peers, I feel like that feeling isn't reciprocated, even though, that also impacts their lives. Teaching kids, especially where our water comes from, is important because that keeps them, as Zachary said, minded for the future. They know that it is not entirely their responsibility, but partially their responsibility to also make sure like they take care of the water and the resources surrounding them, and that they're appreciative and know that they can truly also make a change and ensure that those resources are here for the youth in generations to come.
Amazing. I agree with both of you so much. And I'll just add, I spoke to it a little bit in my presentation, but I can literally give examples, and I will right now actually, of my students who, because they learned this type of curriculum in high school, which is a private high school in San Francisco, they have decided to work in the water industry. And one example is a student named Kate who graduated before my time, but she graduated in 2007, and she started a really successful company that tracks water leaks in piping, and that's now been acquired by another company. I had another student who graduated in 2018 who's currently a PhD student at UC Davis, and she's doing research on how to recharge groundwater. And that was because she told me she decided to do that because in our class, we met people in the Central Valley who don't have water coming out of their taps because their groundwater is all depleted. And so she was so impacted by that moment in school that it set her off on a track, and she's now at UC Davis, and she's hosting me next week to come and talk to the hydrology department. So those are like 2 of dozens of examples of young people who have taken this type of education or had the opportunity to have this class at a private school in San Francisco, and it's changed their life. And so that's why I'm so passionate about bringing this not to just private school students, but to have Bay Area students in public schools get to have these life-changing water moments in high school from a young age. Yeah. So I think that's our questions, right? So I guess the last thing I'll just say to everybody, so you can see me, is I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much to the organizers who make this happen, who are bringing all the people together, and thank you to everybody who decided to take your whole day to talk about water and care about our water systems. And this is my first stop of a speaking tour to fundraise for educational curriculum about water in the Bay Area. So if you're interested in coming to a longer talk and learning more about my walk or about the educational curriculum, come and find me at the table. I'm near the registration booth in the front. And I can tell you when my next speaking events are, or if you feel like supporting water education in Bay Area schools, please come talk to me. We are looking for all the support we can get, whether that's grants, we have a nonprofit designation, or foundation donations, personal donations. So yeah, thank you all so much, and a big thank you to Rohan and Zach for joining me on stage and bringing their voices in.